believe last time we talked about was to identify criteria for selecting health-related problems to become a priority in research. So you already have groups, and I've got the groupings already. So it's a reminder that in the group small groups in using the criteria to identify priorities, you need to have a group consensus technique. Okay, in which you need to select an appropriate subject for research proposal, and we're going to look into that as we go on with our lectures. Okay, so conditions that require research, as we said, there was a perceived discrepancy, and the reasons for these differences are unclear, and it is important to know that there should be one possible answer to the question or solution to the problem that you are trying to look into. Okay, so the criteria for prioritizing problems for research, one of which is should be relevant. So relevant, which means kinahanglan ba, dapat ba tutukan, do we need to look into it, or would it help us in our practice? Okay, and not just would help us in our practice, would it be also help our patients in the future? Okay, and number two is avoidance of duplication. Never do that, because duplication is a sin. Mortal sin is a more or less like plagiarism, and we can be sued for that. We can be sued for that. And also the feasibility, that is feasible to conduct that particular research, and feasibility in terms of funding, in terms of time, in terms of other considerations, and also political acceptance, like politically correct. We are not we are not like pushing for issues or proposals which are contrary to our political situations. And also its applicability. It should be applicable. You can do it. Anybody can do it. It can be done by anyone and in the field. And also you feel the need for the urgency of data needed. And lastly, it should have ethical acceptability, which means it does not do harm or damage to anybody or the person's physically, emotionally, or mentally. We need to consider those things. Again, when to further discuss relevance, questions to be asked includes how large or widespread is the problem, who are affected or who is affected, like how severe is the problem. So if you do not consider a topic relevant, it is not worthwhile to continue rating it. So in that case, you should drop it from the list. So among the group consensus, you look at the relevance of your topic. Okay, and avoidance, whether that the topic has been suggested or investigated before, either within the proposed study or another area with similar conditions. So if the topic has been researched, determine the design strategy used, and the results should be reviewed to explore whether major questions that deserve further investigations remained unanswered, but never duplicated the way it was done. Okay, that's why in making questionnaires or standard, we call it standard questionnaire, because the questionnaire that is being used is the same to all the respondents. And some, which I always tell them that you should not copy or adopt, but rather you create your own standard, you create your own questionnaire or survey questionnaire in accordance to your study, so that there will be no duplication on that particular entity. Okay? So it's a good to note also to consider whether carefully you find answers to the problem in available and published information and from common sense. So if you can find, whether you can find available and published information, so if that happens, you should drop the topic from your list, because you cannot do some, or you cannot get some review of related literature if it was not published. And also if it common if using your common sense, it does not, it does not, there's no merit in it. So why do it? Okay. Another is the feasibility. As we talked about a while ago, you should consider the following rating your proposed topic. So complexity of your problem. So in which like your resources such as time, equipment, and money, and also especially now during COVID, that if your respondents are so far away, or if the availability of collecting the data is impossible with the quarantines and others, you should not consider it at all, because as you might not be able to graduate because of the difficulty of that, of getting information. Okay, and if you need, especially now that you are in the first year, the need for equipment is unnecessary. I think we should practice simplicity is brevity. We're starting in a medical parlance for researches, so it would be better to make it more practical. And in fact, always tell people doing the medical research or clinical researches that you don't have to be ambitious enough to look into the highfalutin or uh, highly expensive, time consuming papers or documents or research studies. You just have to look first on the baseline, whatever is there on the baseline that you can identify. Because if you go directly to the high end, or to, how do you call, using equipments and such and sets, and money is impossible, and you have to spend for it for your study, I don't think it's necessary at this time, especially in a region at present, even at EVRMC, wherein they have been doing a lot of researches and studies, and even in RTR hospital or Daewoo Hospital. I was telling them time and time again that you look first on the basic informations that you have. What are those basic informations? What are your baselines that you can look into in order for you to improve your practice? And in the feasibility, we need to explore the possibility of obtaining technical and financial resources from external sources which may be available at the national regional research councils, or even the local hospitals or universities. The In fact, as I've discussed before, we have in Eastern Visayas Health Research and Development Consortium. If your proposal is within the context of their priority programs, they might fund your projects. I think I'm challenging the students of RTR to come up with sound and good protocols that would be of great help or good contribution of the institution to the AVHRDC or to the PCHRDC in for that matter. In fact, like in other schools, they've been saying that, like in EVSU and also in VSU, wherein they are the great leader. Also, even in LMU, they're now the great leaders in conducting researches, and they're also into medical or clinical research, medical health or health related researches. And it's like, my God, how come that they are into it and they're good into it, and we on the medical field are not into that one? It's like, what's happening? Why are we not doing something about it when we ourselves practicing in the medical field should be the one to have a piece of the pie of the funding when it comes to health researches? Okay. Because of that consortium, other institutions are engaged or encouraged to conduct health related studies. So, and they're very good with non-health related studies. So why shouldn't they be good at health related studies? And that's why it's also very important that we join with them during the regional consortium fora and other activities, so that we will have an idea on what are those studies that are being given priority or given funding. So I don't think if RTR College of Medicine in the past have passed some of these proposals with funding from the EVHRDC. Okay? So hopefully with you guys in the second year, they can provide one. Okay. So when we talk about political acceptability in general, it's advisable to research a topic that has the interest and support of the authorities. So, for example, in the Department of Health, they identified various topics that can be funded also. The Department of Health in itself has its own funding sources. Aside from the EVHRDC, wherein they pulled a lot of resources from the DOST and other institutions, the Department of Health per se has its own funding, as well as the institutions like EVRMC and the Windward Hospital and RTR hospitals. It's like an inherent on the institution to provide funding for researchers, and that's why we need to also to have to engage with these people, and also even at the local government unit, that they should local government unit or the government agencies, that they could also allocate some funds for conducting researches that would be very helpful in their program implementations at their level. Okay, so in fact, in the political acceptability, it will increase the chance that the results and recommendations will be implemented, or policies may need to be adjusted and limit the chance of confrontation like later, especially nowadays with this COVID-19. There are a lot of, for me, I frankly, there are a lot of loopholes in terms of local implementations and in implementing health protocols. So the need for conducting researches is so important as well. Well, we can say not to hurt their ego or something. It has to be politically acceptable to them. And as I've said, the legalities when it comes to implementation of research is not just being given to us, but it's also being encouraged in all government entities, from the national to the local levels. Even the local government units, they are being encouraged to allocate fund for researches and also to support people who are doing researches at the local level. Okay. Hello, are you listening to me, people?
Yes,
Okay,
bro. Yes,
okay.
bro.
Talking so
Yes,
fast,
Doc.
you just look at also at the PowerPoint that I'm talking. Okay, and number five is applicability of possible results and recommendation. One of the important aspects, and I think the need for the government, the national government, as well as the Department of Health and other agencies, that these researches are the results are very important. It should be analyzed well so that conclusions and recommendations would be feasible, timely, and can be implemented, which means now it's like for several years researchers have been there. In fact, very good researchers of international standards, but the bottom line, or at the end of the day, is the probability of implementing the recommendations. That's why the Center for the Center CDC, or the Center for Disease Control in US, and in collaboration with the Philippine Department of Health and in other agencies right now, the advocacy is to create or to enhance the policies out of these researches. That's why being observant of all the researches or studies that we are doing right now, only few of the agencies are putting actions into the putting policies into actions. So I think, like I for one is advocating that all these results, we need to take note of this one and to recommend policies for actions. So fortunately, the EVHRDZ has engaged in conducting activities and other fora and training for formulation of policies out of the results of the health researches. At the end of the day, like, one of the recommendations in conducting the research is that it would solve problem or improve the life of the people, as well as improve ourselves in the medical practice. Okay, so the recommendations, doing the research, public health action is also is a must. It should be the first and foremost consideration. And that is why the relevance of the study, the applicability, the political acceptability should be considered, because policy in action is one of the main goal of these studies. It is not just, I think, I now I am realizing that the reason some people are not really, loving or not really into the researches, because they thought that it was a menial job. It was just like a requirement that you have to do it because it's being required of you as a student, or it's being required of you as a resident physician, so that you can take a diplomate exam or whatever. But I was telling them that you have to, rewire your thinking. You have to think differently, but rather to make research as part of our improving our practice by creating recommendations that should be implemented to change the policies that we have been doing, because we know that there are, upon evaluation, there are a lot of things that we need to scratch or erase in order to improve the implementation of the program. So public health action is the first and foremost priority in doing health researches. In fact, personally, that's the reason why I like to work in an international government agencies like WHO, USAID, or UNDP, because I can sense, and I have experienced that the studies that we are doing, we were able to change the policies at the national level. In fact, if you have known about the Garantisadong Pagbata, there is always an annual evaluation, a biannual evaluation of that program. And through time, because of the annual evaluation, annual research studies that were conducted, it has evolved into a more appropriate studies, more appropriate strategies. In fact, there are a lot of strategies that were changed through time because of the research studies as well as evaluation studies that were done. So it's either to scratch it out or to improve or to implement new policies. So that's how I think that's what motivates me being a researcher, is that policy or health in action. It's not just doing the research, but it's changing the things that have been there which are not useful in anymore. The things that should, this is what you call serendipity, that you have to accept the things that you can change, and also have the brevity to accept the things that you cannot change. Because if you cannot change it, it's a fact of life. You have to accept it. But for those things that can be changed, and research and other evaluation studies is very much necessary. So if one, if you will have that motivation that in doing the researches you can change the things that have been there which is not useful anymore, and it has to, innovative strategies has to be created, then you will understand that research is a very good avenue for that change. Okay. And I think that advocacy is should be, I think I should always do that. So as first year research students doing the research, if you think it like it's a requirement for you, then it's going to be difficult, it's going to be a difficult skill to acquire. But if you think, or if you accept that doing the research would help you improve your practice and also help improve the public health action, then you will see that research is a good thing to do. Okay, it's a noble thing to do actually. Okay, and the urgency of data needed. How urgently are the results needed for making a decision, and which research should be done first and which can be done later? We are doing this one in terms of urgency because, for example, in programs like contraceptions and in programs like annual vaccinations, is it really necessary to do these things? Is it do the large amount of money enough or not enough or useful in continuing the programs or projects. That's why there's always, if you can observe, there are always a lot of things that are happening with our national government in terms of implementing programs and projects because of the researches that are being conducted. And even in clinical practice in the hospital, like before, we were using aspirin for pain relievers and other diseases, but because of researches, aspirin was a blood thinner, so it could cause bleeding, or it could cause other types of adverse effects to those patients who are using it, even before it was being used among children. And it was because of research, because of further studies that were done, because of its adverse effects, especially in children, in creating um, blood dyscrasias and other disorders. It was eliminated, only now being directed to be used for special cases like patients with hypertension to prevent blood clotting. So you might see and observe among your parents or aunts or grandparents that they are using aspirin now as a blood thinner for their hypertension or cardiovascular disease. But during our time when we were students, aspirin, even in our younger days when we were still in elementary, high school, and college, aspirin was being used as a pain reliever. It was also being used as a not just a pain reliever. Uh, it was also used for headaches. It was also used for uh, fever and the others. But because of researches, the importance of the urgency of data needed, its utilization was being um, reversed back or being improved. In fact, similar to chloramphenicol. I think you will know that if you are a nursing student, or a pharmacy student, you will know about chloramphenicol as a drug of use for typhoid fever. Okay, and in the 70s and 80s, chloramphenicol was used in many types of infections, bacterial infections that were even used on simple folliculitis or boils or whatever. And similar to amoxicillin, it was like in higher format. So, but again, it has a different reactions on patients, especially on young individuals. It can also cause dyscrasia. It can also cause abdominal disorders. So chloramphenicol was most likely used only for salmonella typhi or typhoid fever. And even at present, there are other drugs that are less with lesser adverse effects. So chloramphenicol is just put behind us now. Okay? Because the blood dyscrasia that's being created by chloramphenicol entails much more management and treatment. That's why uh, chloramphenicol is rarely used nowadays. Okay? But before, it was like how do you call that? The one of the miracle drugs. One of the miracle drugs. And during my early days as a medical doc, a young doctor, I was even like, I would know if the doctor is you know, a senior citizen or in more than 30 years in practice, because they would be prescribing chloramphenicol for simple infections. So you might also know, you might be observing that that doctor is not into researches or even reading updates. It's important if you become if you become a doctor, even now as a medical student, to be updated, to learn how to read researches, to learn how to, because it's dynamic, or practice is dynamic. Scientific breakthrough happens almost all the time. So if you don't join conferences and different fora, mauurhi ka talaga. Okay? You don't stop learning. Doctor never run out of patients, but we run out of patients. Dili ka mawawarayan yung pasyente, pero mawawarayan ka kuno yung pasensya. And dili ka dapat maundang to have, you should have or start now to develop that learning process. Sige lang tuon, sige api, kay dili pwede maundang ka, otherwise mauri ka. And there are young doctors who are more better, and there are innovations and strategies that are being created and implemented. And I think for me, I'm just fortunate because I'm into research even before the idea, or even before that programs or projects or breakthrough are in the market. I already know about it, because sometimes, especially in the Department of Health's programs and projects, we are the one, or I was one of those who did the evaluation studies. So, ang bagat takon man si Celine, that learning attitude is really important. Dili pa nga ni naulpot, if you know how to read researches and if you love researches, dili pa naulpot nga ni iton bag-o, ngin ka bag-o nga dili pa nga ni nila nasasabtan, pero ikaw maaram ka na. Okay? That's why in research, in this research subject, I want you to learn, I want you to know how to be able to evaluate and to look into researches, and to make it part of your daily life, not to be afraid of it. It's just okay. And that's the reason why we have technical reviewers, you have a peer review, so that in doing some researches, you can have your mentors. Kay di ka talaga ito makapi-perfect. One or two heads are better than one. Bisan pa ano ito kaupay, ano kakarit, kay not change siya all the time. And it's not, for me, one of the lessons I've learned is not to take it personally, you know? Not to take it personally, just to take in a stride. Kay amoy to hiya. Dili ka talaga masiling nga mape-perfect mo ni, no way. Even I, who have been doing this for almost 20 years, I always say I don't know that yet. I I I think I need to look into to that entity again, because time changes. Okay? Okay, hain na ako dapat. Okay? Are you still there, guys? Do you have a class after me? What time is it? What time is it? Tell me if it's time already. May dapat ako, may dapat ako
7:55
time?
na.
Ha?
May dapa pa 5 minutes.
Okay, you tell me. Okay? Okay. So another important aspect in doing the research is ethical acceptability. In fact, in the EVHRDC, in its manual of operation, because there is a manual of operation in conducting researches, and there are various um, committees that would look into the research, so that it would be acceptable, it would be politically correct. One of the important aspect is the ethical acceptability. We should always consider the possibility that we may inflict harm on others while carrying out the research, especially in the in the clinical based researches or analytic, because there is a, with the use of the placebo, it's it's an experimental design, and we really need to review the study you are proposing and considering important ethical issues, such as how acceptable to those who will be studied, the cultural sensitivity. It should be carefully considered, and the possibility of getting informed consent if we are looking into sensitive issues like reproductive health. In fact, informed consent is an important component in doing youth surveys in about reproductive health, in youth reproductive health, on family planning, and those that would entail sensitive or personal issues. It really needs ethical acceptability. In fact, in doing a research, especially us, right now we are doing a United Nations development projects on family planning, the concept contraceptive prevalence rate. We are looking into the women of reproductive age. When you talk about women of reproductive age, it means women who have who already have menstruation, and usually it's from the age of 15 to 49 years old. So these are women with menstrual cycles and can produce children. And in getting informations on contraceptions, it's one of the cultural sensitive issues. That's why ethical acceptability is always being asked. And and in fact, the EVHRDZ, like RTR and EVRMC, have ethics committee. So aside from looking at the technical side on how the research is going to be done, there's also an counterpart, which is the ethics committee, and they will look into your protocol that it should not harm. It should be, sensitive to the pertinent issues within the area of your study. For example, there are terms that are not acceptable in this particular areas or entities. There are words. Usually, in order to get much more in-depth information, the survey questionnaire has to be translated into the local dialect. And this translation has to be more or less created that would be cultural sensitive, because sometimes there is a sometimes there is a big discrepancy in the English language and also in the local dialect. So I think similar to the things that you are going to do in the future, if you look into reproductive health, youth, and those areas that needs ethical consideration, we should look into it. Okay, so ethics review is important, and now there's a policy that if even an international organization that has passed through an ethical review at the international level or at the WHO level, we still need to have our ethics review in the area that we are going to conduct the study, like in the Philippine context and at the local level or regional level. So damot ethics review kung mga international studies. Sa nga ni kami ito makatapos, ti pakadi ha ubos, may informed consent ka pa. So if the informed consent is less than 21 years old, makuha ka pa yung consent from the mother. So imo pa yung haon kay part of the ethical acceptability. So we can look into it in our lectures. Okay. So what time is it? What time is it? Pero may akong gina-remind sa opisina to be
8:01 na po,
on
Doc.
time.
8:01
Okay.
na po.
So do you have any questions? Were you able to at least somehow understand what I've been talking about? And we'll just continue again. This is a very important topic on identifying and prioritizing health problems. I know that it is one of the main contexts, the main issue that the students will have. Just relax, keep it cool, we can identify them. Okay? But you can now browse among yourselves what topics do you want. You read. You can listen into your lectures, you can identify some. Okay? Okay, do you have questions? Okay, okay. You can look at the internet. You can go to the EVHRDZ website. They have there, the, okay. Oh, did it? You can look at the website of EVHRDZ. Okay, they have a website, and they also okay. Uh, that's one of the things. Not adopting anyway, not really adopting, but looking into it at the local context. They always say adoption. Why do they love the term? You can create your own. It's what we call validity. So you can look at it at the local context. Okay, that's why we have related studies, related literature, so you can identify which things would be possible and feasible within the country. It's not. It's not more or less an adaptation, but at least you are trying to validate. Okay, if it's also same or true within the country. Anyway, we'll look into that one later. So you focus first on the INTs that are important components of identifying and prioritizing health research. Okay, some more questions? Can we have the attendance already? There's still students who are coming in. Okay,
Excuse me, Doc.
okay, okay,
Hello? Doc, may da po nag-asking question na
okay,
chat.
okay. Ano ko no?
Na-ask po ya kung usually daw, kailan po yung data gathering?
Second, usually in the third year. We will look into that one because I was proposing for a descriptive study for the first and second year, and usually in the after the methodology is done, and usually in the third year, second year or third year, depending on your study. Okay, so at this point in time, we will be focusing on chapter one and chapter two. Because the review of related literature is the one that is like a heavy entity. Okay, and also in identifying the priority programs that you would like to do. Okay, so just list them all and we'll look into it. Okay, some more questions?
Good morning po, Doc.
Okay,
Paano po yung consultations for the proposed topics?
we will be doing it online as part of our plenary later. I will tell you when. Okay,
Thank you.
but at this point in time, you just identify all the possible topics that you can have. And I will tell you during one of our sessions to have that group consensus. So, other questions? We will
Good
do the
morning, Doc.
things of our research during our research. Okay?
Good morning, Doc.
Okay. Mm,
This is Doc. This is Noel. Doc, we would
okay.
just like to ask kasi we already had a group discussion with our group mates regarding our
Okay.
research plan. So our
The
question, Doc,
topics.
is what will be the process, Doc? Bali, we will identify like 3 to 4 research topic and we will present it, Doc, to you so that uh,
We
that
will have a plenary of that later. Okay?
that
We will have a plenary of that. You just take note. You just keep those things first.
Uh, so we will just list more possible research problems discussed by our group, then present it
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
us. Thank you,
Yeah.
Doc.
Yeah. Then
Thank,
we'll have a plenary. Yes.
thank.
I will lead you on the workshop. At least you have, that's very good of you that you already have topics, but still look some more. Okay? And look
Thank you,
into
Doc.
the different entities or needed requirements. Okay? And we will continue and finish this one and we'll do some workshops with identifying, prioritizing your program or your health problem. Okay? So some more question and it's no time. So you have your next subject with you? Next subject pa ka mo? 8 o'clock?
Yes.
Sige, okay. So, good morning to all of you. Kalmala, we will do it. At least you have your own topics. So, para mas medyo one semester man ini. Okay? Okay. So, good morning again.
Thank
Pira
you,
kita,
Doc.
nag-attendance na kamo?
Thank you, Doc.
Nag-attendance na ka mo?
Nag-attendance na po ako, Doc. 115 tanan.
Okay. About the student who is out, it's okay. 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 So good morning again. See you next session. Okay.
Diba?
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you,
Thank you po,
Doc.
Doc.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Doc.
Doc.
Uh,
Thank you, Doc.